A good day to you, Hungarians. I hope you're doing okay this day. I'd like to present to you your next social studies project. All right, let's have a look at this. You finished ancient Greece, and now we're moving on to our last unit of study for the year of ancient civilizations. And this is going to be a project pertaining to ancient Rome or Mesoamerica. Rome is basically the great world empire that followed after ancient Greece. And Mesoamerica, that pertains to First Nations groups that were in North America, particularly around Mexico, Central America, and South America, uh, quite a few centuries ago. Groups like the Maya, the Aztec, or the Inca. So you'll get a lot of choice in this particular project, what your topic will be, what your narrowed focus, and how you're going to go about doing it as well. So let's start with step one. It's going to be to select your topic, and we'll start with Rome. These are some of the possible topics. You could do the Colosseum, which was their big stadium where lots of different things went on. You could choose military, which will include weapons. I had a kid one year actually make a bunch of these ancient weapons that the Romans fought with and talked about some of their military strategies. And you could do food and fashion, architecture. The Romans were famous for building a lot of different structures, and they were the first ones who really began to use concrete in a lot of their building. The Romans leaders, I guess you can call them their kings, or were called Caesars, and there were a number of different famous ones. Julius Caesar, very famous. Uh, Shakespeare wrote a play about Julius Caesar. Nero Caesar, another famous one. He was a bit of a well, some people would say a nutcase, a very strange individual. So if you're into that sort of thing, you could research him. And there are a number of other Caesars as well, Augustus Caesar and many others. Roman gladiators, they were the ones who fought in the Colosseum. Some interesting stories around that. Masada, that was an ancient fortress built on the top of a mountain in ancient Israel, and there's a very interesting story around it that connects it to ancient Rome, where a bunch of Israelites called the Zealots, a political group, were fleeing from Roman oppression and persecution, and the Romans came to basically hunt them down. And I won't say any more of the story, but it's a very interesting one. A very interesting place too. You just Google this place and get some images on it. It's quite a fascinating fortress that people still visit today. You could do one on Roman women, sports and games, the ancient city of Pompeii, which ended up getting buried by Mount Vesuvius, a volcanic blast that took place in AD 79. And even today, lots of people go there as a tourist attraction, and it's very interesting the way they've set it up today for people to see. There are many famous battles in ancient Roman history. They also came up with many different types of formations. We talked about in ancient Greece how Philip came up with the phalanx, which was a very formidable formation of soldiers. There are a lot of different ones that the Romans came up as well, some that actually could fight against the phalanx, and a number of others. You could do religion, what tied into their religion. They had things like Caesar worship. They also had a number of different gods they borrowed from the Greeks, interestingly enough, changed the names. You could be an ancient tour guide, and there's no shortage of interesting places to visit in ancient Rome that you could take people on, almost like getting into a time machine. And now I'm going to take you to all these different places, and you'll have to describe them obviously very well. You could do Roman Christianity. You could touch on things like um, what role Rome played during the life of Christ or during the times of the early church as we read in Acts. What was Paul's thoughts towards Rome? What was Jesus' thoughts towards Rome? And even beyond. Uh, there's a historical argument that one of the Roman emperors actually became a Christian named Constantine. So you could talk about that as well, if that interests you. The catacombs are these underground passageways underneath the city of Rome where sometimes the Christians would hang out to hide from the Roman authorities because they were trying to escape persecution. There were also a lot of bodies buried under there, so it's kind of got this creepy interest to it. You could do Roman art. There were a number of different styles of art that they did, like frescoes, to name one. You could, if you're an artsy type of person, you could do a few different art pieces that are in this ancient Roman style. Aqueducts were these passageways to transport water, sometimes up to hundreds of kilometers. And some of them are still standing today in Rome, in Italy. And they're quite fascinating, this type of technology that they came up with. I had a kid one year build a model of an aqueduct. Some of you may have seen it. It's in our cloakroom on top of the cubbies. You could do the Roman Forum. It's kind of the Roman equivalent of the Athens Agora. It's where everyone met. It had temples and other very reputable buildings, including the Colosseum. It's where people hung out. And many of the ruins are still around today that you can actually visit. If Rome does not excite you in any way, then you can consider Mesoamerica instead. Lots of different opportunity or ideas for that. You can do Machu Picchu, which is this ancient city on this mountain that was hidden for many centuries in Peru, and then some European explorer in the late 1800s discovered it, and people were pretty amazed. And now it's one of the #1 visited tourist places in all the world. You could do the Mayan pyramids. Aztecs built pyramids too, in a different style. So it's not just the Egyptians, and they're quite fascinating. I've had kids in the past build a model of a pyramid and then talk about it. You could do Aztec religion, Mayan religion. The Aztecs and Mayans were really into things like human sacrifices and ripping out hearts of live victims and things like that. So if that interests you, you could do Mayan astronomy or mathematics. They were extremely sophisticated for their time. The way they built their cities, their temples, their pyramids were not random, but were often in line with the heavenly bodies like the stars, the sun, the moon, and they had the ability to predict eclipses, which is quite fascinating. You could do Aztec or Mayan military weapons. Had a kid one year build a whole bunch of Aztec weapons and talk about them, and it was very interesting. You do Spanish conquest. That's when the Spaniards came over and basically began to colonize and take over, kind of similar to the way the French and the English did in Canada. So those are some options for you to do. You're not restricted to these topics. You could come up with something that is not on here, that is related to ancient Rome or ancient Mesoamerica, and propose it. So after you've come up with your broad topic, then you will narrow it. Think about what you specifically want to research for this. Next step is to submit your project proposal. You'll do this on Google Classroom. You'll propose it, and then I'll have a look at it, and I'll give you some feedback on it. I might say, it looks great, go for it, start researching, or I might say, um, I would suggest that you change this a little bit, or this might be too difficult for you to do, and we'll just talk about it. Some of the project possibilities, you could do it on Google Slides. You could do a dramatic monologue. One year I had a kid who really wanted to do a Roman gladiator, a day in the life of, so he made a gladiator's outfit, and then he composed a monologue, a script, and then he had that memorized, and then he shared it and videotaped it. It was really good. But of course, he had to know what a gladiator was all about in order to do this. He didn't just randomly come up with his own dialogue or monologue. You could build a model, Colosseum, a pyramid, an aqueduct. You could do a travel brochure, as mentioned, be a tour guide. You could do it in a brochure. You could do it on using some form of technology if you wanted to. You could do trading cards. You could do famous Roman people. Maybe you do Caesar trading cards and do 10 different Caesars, collect them all, that sort of thing, and make it look like, baseball cards or Pokemon cards or something like that, but just do it within ancient Roman context and make it fit with information on the back and pictures on the front. You could do an essay. You could compose a play if you're into that, if you're kind of more into the theater mindset. You could do a newscast. In my class last year for Holes, we did newscasts on different things that took place in the book. But in order to do this, it's got to fit within an ancient context. So you have to choose an event maybe that you're reporting on, or multiple events that took place. Maybe it's a famous battle. Maybe it's the assassination of Julius Caesar, and you're reporting on that. And you set up your news studio and that sort of thing, and have a first century Roman name or something like that. Anyway, puppet show or whatever else. Maybe you've got a better idea that for something that you like that's not in here. Once you've presented your proposal and I've okayed it, you can begin researching and then making your project. Be prepared to work at least 12 hours on this project. So for a month, that works out to about 3 hours a week. So if you're wanting to do I work on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but not on weekends, then that averages out to about an hour a day. After about 2 weeks, I'm going to set up Zoom meetings for groups of 4. I will pick the groups of 4, and we'll all get together, and you will share what you have done so far in your project. So you have to be working on this and not leaving it to the last minute. Then everyone in the group, including myself, we will give you feedback on it and maybe give you some ideas and make sure you're headed in the right direction for that. Now, in Google Classroom, all of these instructions will be on the instruction section. And then what I want you to do is to copy and paste what you see in red here into a document in Google Classroom. You'll put your topic in, whatever it is, after this. You'll type up your proposal, which should only be about 3 or 4 sentences, saying, this is my project. I'm going to build the Roman Colosseum. It's going to be made using styrofoam and wood. It's going to be about 2 feet by 1 foot high and 1.5 feet across. And I may end up incorporating little figurines to make it more realistic. I'm going to include what it looked like on the inside, so a bird's eye view, that sort of thing. You give some details, but it's just very general, your project proposal. And that's your due date, June 1st for that. So that's about it. If you have questions, you can ask me at the Monday morning Zoom meetings, or you can just fire out an email to me if you're stuck on something, and I'll try to help you as best I can.